Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to create lots and lots of chords on the piano. I'm going to cover 36 chords. I've got the 7s, I've got extensions, I've got 6s, I've got triads, sus chords, the lot. So I'm pretty much trying to cover every common chord you find on the chord chart. Now how I'm going to do this, I'm going to show you how to work it out in root position so you understand the theory about how it's created and why it's labelled the way it is. And then I'm going to show you my favourite inversion of those chords, because rarely do you play these chords in root position when you're actually performing. But remember, with chord inversion, smooth voice leading should be your guide with inverting chords. So if you don't know what I'm talking about there, I've got a video talking about inversions that you can check out. But let's dive in and look at our 36 chords. So with all these chords, I'm going to label the notes in relation to the major scale. So for example, if I say C major 7, I'm going to say, oh, you play the root, which is the first note of the scale, then the third, the fifth, and the seventh note of the scale. So when we're transferring to other chords, you'll use that same technique, but you just have to think in the scale of that key. So for example, F major, root, third, fifth, and seventh gets you that same major 7 chord. But with all these chords, I'm just going to show you in C major. Use this video as a resource. I'll have some chapters to direct you to the different groups of chords that we've got here. Let's start with C5. That is simply the root and the fifth. Then we've got C major, which is the root, the third, and the fifth. And the inversion I like to use for major triads is second inversion. That's pretty much because it creates this nice strong sound at the lower end of the piano, and then this top note really gives it that colour. The next chord is C minor. For this one we have root, the flat third, and the fifth. C minor. And again, I like to use second inversion generally for this one. Then we've got the C sus. The C sus is the root, the fourth, and the fifth. A suspended is usually creating that tension to resolve to the major chord, or resolve to the minor chord. At some points I like to use second inversion with this one as well. It's because it gives that resolution in the top voice there. Next one on my list is C augmented. So this is like a C major, but we just raise the fifth. And the thing with this one is, as you invert it up and down, the intervals between the notes are exactly the same. So I don't have a particular preferred starting point for that one. The next one on my list is C diminished. That's like the minor chord that we had before, but we flatten the fifth. And again, I don't really have a preferred inversion for this. It's really just depends on the context of the chord progression you find it in. Next thing we've got is C add2, which is your C major chord, adding the second note. Sometimes you see this written as a C add 9. You can also have C minor add 2, or C minor add 9, sometimes you see it as. I don't really have a preferred inversion for these, but you can have an experiment with the second inversion. It really depends on the chord progression and where that chord comes in. Next up, we have the C6, root, third, fifth, and the sixth. Sometimes I like to do the first inversion of that one, but again, it just depends on the context of where it fits. Root, third, fifth, sixth. Now we can also have a minor 6, so it's just changing this third to a flat third. Root, flat third, fifth, sixth. And that brings us to 7th chords. Alright, so first of all, we've got our C major 7. like to invert this one is just starting it off the 7th note. Like that. The other thing with these chords, if you're playing the root in the left hand, you don't always need the root in the right hand. So you can also play it like this. Okay, now we've got a C7. It's a bit like the major 7. Root, 3rd, 5th, but a flat 7. And the inversion I like to use for this one is building this chord off the 7th note. And again, we don't necessarily need the root in there as well. So next we have the C minor 7. For this we've got the root, flat 3, 5th, flat 7. Again, usually I like to play this off the 7th note when I'm inverting it. And you don't need the root if it's in the left hand. But you can use it if you do like that thicker texture sound. Next up we have C minor major 7. This is root, flat 3, 5th, major 7th. This is kind of like the James Bond chord, but we'll get to that later. For this one, I can invert it with the 7th at the bottom as well. Gives a nice clashy sound, and we can take the root out of the right hand if we want. Okay, then we've got C minor 7, flat 5. So just like our C minor 7 here, we're going root, flat 3rd, but then also the flat 5 and the flat 7. Again, I love to build this chord off the flat 7. And sometimes I take the root out as well. Then we've got C7 diminished. It's a little bit like the C minor 7 flat 5, but then we also double flat the 7. That creates a really cool shape because it's all built from minor thirds. And we can invert this just like the augmented shape that I showed you earlier. And we can really start that off any key because it's a symmetrical chord. And it depends where it appears in the chord progression to what inversion you use. So those notes are root, flat 3rd, flat 5th, and double flat 7. Or you could think of it as a 6. But theoretically, it is a 7 chord, so we're thinking of it a double flat 7. Next up, we have C7 sus. So for that, we have root 4, which is our suspended note, 5th and 7th. Again, that can resolve really nicely. For this one, I like to think of it as B flat over C. Now that does actually give you a 9 there technically, but whenever I see C7 sus in the chart, often I'm just thinking B flat over C. Or wherever I am on the keyboard, I'm thinking the tone below the root note and playing that major chord. So if I'm in F, tone below the root note is E flat, and I play an E flat major over the F. And that gives me an F7 sus. Next up we have C augmented 7. And that is just like this. Root, 3rd, sharp 5. Just like our augmented chord. And then our 7 up the top here. And again, the way I like to play this one is building it off the 7th note. And again, I don't normally have the root in the chord if it's in the left hand there. You get this kind of nice sort of train siren sound. Nice tense 5 chord you can use there. Great, so that's all my 7 chords and how I commonly play them. Now we're getting into the realm of extensions. Now let's talk about extensions before I dive into the chords. Extensions basically are extra notes you can add to those 7 chords. So for example, we can have this note here, which is 7, 8, 9. Then we've got 10, 11, and 13. So our extensions are just 9s, 11s, and 13s. Now here's the thing. Extensions don't have to be over the 7 to be what they are. So for example, if I play a C9, this is also a C9. But what it needs to be a 9 rather than a 2 is it needs the 7th in the chord. If the 7th isn't in the chord, it's a C add 2. The 7th is in the chord, becomes a C9. So it's the 7th that makes these 2, 4, 6s into 9, 11, and 13s. So they are essentially the same notes, 2, 4, 6, but they're also 9, 11, and 13, depending on whether the 7th note is in the chord. Now the other thing is, when we get to 11s and 13s, you don't necessarily need the 9 below it. So I'll show you a C11, which isn't very common actually. There's a C11. I could also leave out the 9. And because I don't actually need the 9 in the chord to make that. So with some of the inversions I show you, I might have the 9 in there when it's a 11 or a 13. Sometimes I might not. I'll just show you what I commonly use there. One final thing is that if you're seeing C7s in the chart, it's your discretion whether you want to add extensions or not. So as you get to know these extensions, you can substitute these in wherever you see them in the chart, as long as the core type of 7th chord is correct. So for example, C major 9 is very different to C dominant 9 because the fundamental chord below it is different there. Now alternatively, if you're seeing lots of 13s, 9s in the charts and that's getting really overwhelming, just break them down to those core 7 chords and the piece will still sound the same. The extensions are really just adding texture and color. They're not actually adding functionality to the chord. So if I see a C9 in the chart, I can just play it like this if I want. Root, 3rd and 7th. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is I don't need the 5th in the chord for the chord to function. Okay, I've rambled about extensions enough. Let's actually dive into them and see what they are. Okay, so a C9, that is root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, flat 7th, 9. Because remember, it's like a C7, but we're going a C9. That's our extension there. And the way I like to play this one is build it off the 7th. Now notice here, I've automatically skipped the root in the right hand now. I'm not using that anymore. I can chuck it in, but it gets a bit awkward to play. So generally, this is how I'll play a C9, building it off the 7th. I also like to build it off the 3rd, depending on my voice leading and how I want to invert it in the chart. So off the 3rd, just like that. Again, not having the root in the right hand. Alright, then we've got C11. That's actually not a common one, but I'll show you the theory behind it. Root, 3rd, 5th, flat 7, 9, 11. And that's not very common. It's actually if I see a C11 on the chart, I'll just treat it like a C7 sus, which kind of sounds the same. I personally don't like the sound of the 3rd and the 11th together. I think that clashes too much. So generally, if I see a C11, I just substitute it for a C7 sus. And the inversion I showed you before, the major triad a tone below. Alright, then we've got C13. Root, 3rd, 5th, flat 7, 9. I'm going to skip the 11, and then the 13 here. See, with the 11, it's getting that clash, so I'm just skipping that note. And that's how you would create a C13 in root position. I never play it like this in performance. I'll show you how I play it. Build it off the 7th, have the 9, have the 3rd, and then the 13 at the top. So I'm actually leaving the 5th out. I don't like to have that 5th in there. So 7, 9, 3rd, and the 13 up the top. Now another way I like to do this, depending on my voice leading and inversions, is starting it off the 3rd. So root in my left hand, 3rd, 13, flat 7, and 9. So they're my 2 versions of my C13 chord. Okay, and they're all the dominant diatonic extensions. Diatonic extensions means that we're just staying within the scale. Okay, now we're up to major diatonic extensions. C major 9. Root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9 there. C major 9. Again, I never play it like that in root position. I like to build it off the 7th, and then skip the root because I'm playing it in the left hand. 9, 3rd, and 5th. And sometimes I'll build it off the 9th, depending on how I need my voice leading to roll. Okay, again, C major 11, not a very common chord, but that's how you would work it out. Root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9, 11. Then we've got C major 13. Root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9. I'm going to skip the 11 because I don't think that sounds very good. And the 13 there. Bit of a stretch in root position. Again, I never play it like that in performance. I'll build it off the 7th. Root, 7th, 9, 3rd, 13. And I'm not adding the 5th in the chord there. C major 13. Another inversion of it I like to do is building it off the 3rd. 3rd, 13, 7, 9. So depending on how my voice leading needs to go, I'll do it in one of these 2 ways. And that's all our major diatonic extensions. Now we're on to our minor 7 extensions, diatonic. And we've got C minor 9. Root, flat 3rd, 5th, flat 7th, 9. A great chord. With this one, I've got 2 ways I like to play it. Building it off the 7th like I've done with all my other chords. And having the root there. I love that shape. But also just this nice open voicing off the 3rd works really nice too. So kind of basically root position, but just the left hand's doing the root note. C minor 9. Lovely chord. I love it. And I'll often substitute that. If I just see a minor 7 in the chart, I'll often put a 9 in there because that flows in really nicely. Then we've got a C minor 11. This is one of the cases where the 11 does sound good. Root, flat 3rd, 5th, flat 7, 9, 11. And the reason that sounds good is we no longer have that clash between the 3rd and the 11, which we did with the major chords. Cool. Now, how do I like to play this? Oh, need to think about this one. I think I'll go off the 7th again. 9, flat 3rd, 11, 5th. That's really nice. And even just doing it like this. 9, flat 3rd, 11, 5th, flat 7. It's a very nice crunchy clustery chord, so really any sort of inversion is going to work nicely with that. Okay, and then this one's not as common, but we've got C minor 13, root, flat 3rd, 5th, flat 7, 9, 11, 13. This one clashes a little bit because of the B flat in the 7th note and the 13 there. But it's acceptable. I don't use this one much, to be honest, but if I was inverting it, I might even start it off the 7th, have the 9, 3rd, and the 13 at the top. It's kind of a nice voicing for it. Okay, now we're up to the C minor major chord, and I don't really use the 11s or the 13s with this one, so I'll just show you the 9. Root, flat 3rd, 5th, major 7, 9. And this is our James Bond chord. Oh, I love this chord so much. How I invert it is major 7, 9, flat 3rd, and 5th. That's another way I convert it. But I actually love this one in root position just because I love the James Bond movie so much. Now we've got a couple of chords that are sort of their own sort of property, and they're called 6-9 chords. Now, personally, I don't really like the way they're labelled because I just told you that a 9 must have a 7 to exist. But these are the one exception to that rule, so there's no 7 in these chords. Root, 3rd, 5th, 6, 9. But to me, that's a 2. It should be a 6-2 chord. But anyway, 6-9. That's pretty much the inversion I use for that one. Sometimes I'll do it like this, where the 6, 9, 3rd, and 5th. So either building off the 3rd or building off the 6th. And then we have our minor 6-9, exactly the same but with a flat 3rd. Root, flat 3, 5th, 6, and 9. And I play it like this. Exactly how I just showed you. I'm just doing it down the octave. I like it in that register. Building off the flat 3rd. Or I could build it off the 6. 6, 9, flat 3, 5. Great chords. I love those ones. Alright, now we're getting into chromatic extensions. Now, chromatic extensions are where we're using our extensions, but we're either sharpening or flattening the diatonic extensions. So they're no longer in the scale, therefore they're chromatic. So they're chromatic extensions. Now, the main chord I use these ones on are dominant 7s, and there's a reason for this. In a chord progression, a dominant 7 chord is usually resolving to chord 5 below it. And the idea is you're getting this tension, release, tension, release. And adding these chromatic extensions gives you more colours, more tension there, so it can fundamentally do the same thing big tension, big release. So that's the main function for chromatic extensions, and for that reason, that's why they work the best on dominant 7 chords. Alright, so let's go through them all. C7 flat 9, root, 3rd, 5th, flat 7, flat 9. And the way I like to play this one, if I've got the root in the left hand, I build it off the 7th. And if you look carefully, it's actually a diminished 7 chord. Minor 3rd there, minor 3rd there, minor 3rd there. And if I kept inverting it, we're back to the... So for that reason, I don't really have a particular inversion because they're all symmetrical. So that's, yeah, it will really work off any of those chord notes, except I am not playing the root note in the right hand. Okay, so that's C7 flat 9. Then we've got a C7 sharp 9, and this is a great chord. We've got root, 3rd, 5th, flat 7, then here's the 9, but we sharpen the 9. Now see, it's almost like you've got a major 3rd there and a minor 3rd up the top. And that's the kind of clash I really like. And the reason is creating that tension, that tense sound, which resolves. Sorry, I just shifted it down the octave because I like it better in that register. So that's C7 sharp 9. And for this one, I usually just have it in root position. Sometimes I will just leave the 5th out, especially if my chord progression is doing parallel sharp 9s, like this. Cool, so that's C7 sharp 9. Then we've got C7 sharp 11. C, root, 3rd, 5th, flat 7 because it's the C7 chord, 9, I'm going to skip the 9 actually, and then here's our 11, but we're going to sharp 11. Listen to that tense sound there. Now, with this one, I don't normally play it with the 5th, and sometimes you'll see this chord labelled as a flat 5. But it's the same note, sharp 11. Again, that clashes a bit, so I don't normally have the 5 in the chord. How do I play this? Normally, I will just build it off the 7, like most of the chords I like to do. So that is this. Root, flat 7, 3rd, sharp 11. And sometimes I'll add the 9 in there too. Or the flat 9, or the sharp 9. It's a bit clashy. Usually I do this one. Another way I use this chord is I play a C7 in my left hand and a D major in my right hand. That actually creates a 13 sharp 11 because we've got our 13 note here. Notice I'm not really worrying about the 5th too much either because I'm avoiding that sound. Cool, alright, so that's our C7 sharp 11, or sometimes you see it written as flat 5. Next up we have our last of the chromatic extensions, sharp 5. Now we've actually gone through this a bit like with the augmented 7th, but I'll just show you in this context. Root, major 3rd, sharp 5, and flat 7th. Sometimes you'll see this labelled as a flat 13. So we've got our 13 note here, and that's a flat 13. So that's it in root position. I guess technically I could build it like this for the flat 13. But again, just trying to avoid that clash so I'm not really having the 5th in the chord too much when I'm doing a flat 13. And also because it's pretty much the same as a sharp 5. The way I like to play this is build it off the 7th. So I've got my root in the left hand, flat 7, 3rd, sharp 5. Again, that sort of train siren thing. But I can add my other extensions in. So usually a 9 here. And I can do a flat 9, I can do a sharp. The other way I approach a sharp 5 chord is playing an A flat over C7. That actually gives us a sharp 9 as well. And these are called upper structures, which I have a whole video explaining more about. Because it's just a major chord over a 7th chord. Wow, this video is getting long, but we're almost at the end. Now, sometimes you'll see a C7 altered. What this means is you have your license to add any extensions you like, but they have to be chromatic extensions. So, we can do a few combinations of these. We can do a sharp 5, sharp 9, which looks like this. Root, 3rd, sharp 5, flat 7th, sharp 9. And the other variation of this that I like to do is a C7 flat 5 flat 9. Root, 3rd, flat 5, flat 7th, flat 9. So they're the two I use. Now there's no reason why you can't mix and match those. So I could have flat 5, sharp 9, or I could have sharp 5, flat 9. It all creates that same effect of an altered chord. It's creating all that chromatic extension tension. The other inversion, I've built those off the 3rd. The other way I like to do these are off the 7th. So flat 7, sharp 9, 3rd, sharp 5. Bit of a clash sound there, but again it's serving the purpose of that tension. Or I can go C, flat 7, flat 9, 3rd, flat 5. So there are my two options, and again I can mix and match them. And there are my common ways of playing the C7 altered. Finally, we've got a common chromatic extension that works well over the major 7th chord. And I don't really have many for the other ones, the minor 7ths or the minor major 7ths. So, this is it. It's the C major 7, sharp 11. Root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th if you like, and sharp 11 there. Lovely, lovely chord. I usually play this like this. Root, 7th, 9th, 3rd, sharp 11. And it's a really kind of quirky way to finish a song. So if we're kind of doing our 5 chord, kind of sounds like, oh sorry, I've added the 13 there, but why not? It kind of sounds like it's resolved, but it's still keeping you on edge. So it's a really, really cool one to play around with. Hey guys, thanks for following me through all that. I know that was a long video. It was very comprehensive, but just use it as you need to. Use the chapters to skip around and work out the chords that you want to learn for your charts. Thank you so much for watching this one. If you found it beneficial, please like the video. If you think anyone else will benefit from it, please share it around, or please consider subscribing for my weekly piano lessons. Thank you so much. You're all legends. I'll see you in the next video.